Lorenzo Neal.
Hello, beautiful people. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Zera today. I am your humble host, Dr. Lorenzo Neal, hailing from Cajun Land, USA, here to present you with seeds of wisdom, insight, empowerment, and liberation, providing a knowledge that is transforming and inspiring, inspirational, all that other stuff, empowering, illuminating. And we're inviting all of you, our listeners, to knowing and impacting the world around us. And as always, you're welcome to join us on this illuminating journey. There are several ways you can do so. If you would like to join us, um, you can do so by primarily calling the number 347 237 5230. 347-237-5230. That's the number to call to get your thoughts, 2 cents, 4 cents, 6 cents a dollar in on the show. We are live. We are broadcasting live. You can follow us on all our social media. We are on Facebook, the Zera Network on Facebook. Go there, like that page if you haven't done so, and make sure that you listen to all archive shows. We're on every podcast and internet outlet you can think of for radio. That includes iHeart Radio. We're on there. Apple Radio, Apple Podcasts, iTunes, and Spotify. We're all over the place, so you can follow us on all of that. And make sure you go to my website, lorenzotneal.com. You can listen to archive shows there as well as on the Zera Network Facebook page and blogtalkradio.com/Zera Today Radio. Go there, follow us on all of that. On Twitter, we are on Twitter at Zera Radio. That's the show handle at ZERA Radio. And my personal handle at Lorenzo T. Neal. We got a great show we're going to try to get to today. It's already started off rough. It's already started off rough. It's first. Let me, if you have not heard today, there was another nationally recognized mass shooting. There have been dozens this year, but there was one that happened this morning in the very exclusive part of California, San Juan, I believe that was. And hold on, let me pull it up to make sure I get it right. But anyway, 9 people, San Jose. So 9 people lost their lives. 9 transit employees in the San Jose rail yard today. That 9 person does include the shooter, and the shooter has been recognized by police as a former employee of the rail yard. This shooting takes me back to the 80s and 90s when we had postal workers going around committing crimes like this among their own fellow employees and co-workers. And we coined the term going postal. Employee gets disgruntled, may get fired, may have a negative interaction with another employee, manager or whoever, and you never know if it set them off or not, and they would go and commit a heinous crime, and we coined it going postal. And it's just unfortunate that this happened. It's unfortunate that these shootings have been happening across the country. More mass shootings this year than usual. More shootings this year than usual, and it's sad. So we want to send our condolences out to the families of those 8 persons and even the family of the perpetrator, and the first responders and the employees at that rail yard and the city of San Jose. Here's the thing. that trauma does not just impact the victims' families. It impacts the entire city of San Jose. It impacts the entire state of California. It impacts the entire um, West Coast. It impacts the entire country. It is impacted. This, think about this. San Jose is the technology hub for us. You got Google, you got Facebook, you got Twitter, you got major investors, and startup investors, all of that. You have what, maybe about 1 million people in that area, and it's think about how this Silicon Valley. Just think about Silicon Valley, and think about the fiscal impact Silicon Valley has on the world, and to know that has come that close to them. I know they're going to do something. I know these companies, Google, Facebook, Twitter, I know they finna act up. I know, and y'all know I'm a gun violence prevention advocate. I'm part of Everytown Survivor Network. I do advocacy for responsible gun ownership because I'm a gun owner. I do advocacy for common sense gun law legislation across the country. I'm an advocate for preventing guns from getting in the hands of those who should not have it, including felons, including persons who are severely mentally disabled, or whatever you want to call it. And, a whole lot of other people who shouldn't have guns. But, I already know these companies, these tech companies, if they weren't vocal before, they're going to be vocal now. This is at their door. And these same people who were, I'm going to talk a little bit about this later on as we observe the anniversary of George Floyd's death, murder, whatever you want to call it. How vocal they were then and how much more vocal they are going to be now regarding this issue of gun violence. How much pressure are they going to put on Congress to act and make sure that they follow through with that? Now, earlier this year, the House of Representatives passed some very sweeping legislation, and again, it's good legislation, but it's legislation that's really not going to do much. It's more legislation to say that they did something than legislation to say that it is impacting, right? But I'm glad they did it. I'm glad they did it, and that's all that I am going to say about that. It is something very important that needs to be done, and I think they're going to do it. Now, if you would like to get involved with the action, if you're tired of seeing all of these shootings in your community, NBC released an article earlier this year. I know it released in April, and I think they re-released it in May, a few weeks back, that says that it may seem like America is facing a new wave of gun violence or an increased wave of gun violence in 2021. That's because we are. The data is reflecting that. The data just from these first 5 months of 2021, and looking from 2020 to 2021, shows that gun violence has increased. It's on the rise. And it seems to just be going high. It's a pattern. It's a daily pattern. Let me find the article here. Let me put it up. There have been 160 shootings from January 1st to April 26th. This is what the article said, which is, and their shootings are mass shootings. Okay, mass shootings. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about just regular shootings. They're talking about mass shootings. But if we observe just from our interaction, and even here in the state of Mississippi, in Jackson, we've had nearly half, I think we've got 55, 54, 55 murders, homicides by gun this year on record. Um, and in smaller surrounding rural communities, in the Delta, I believe in Greenwood, Mississippi, there've been like nearly half a dozen just this year, which is a spike. In other smaller areas across the country, gun violence is peaking, right? And it's we've got to address it. Let me get back to this article real quick before I get overwhelmed. So a federal definition or a general definition of a mass shooting is a shooting that involves four or more persons. Okay, whether they're injured or they suffer, they succumb from the wounds. High profile mass shootings that capture the attention of the media, the national media, are usually ones that are carried out by non-people of color. That's the ones that they like to highlight because that's the ones, remind them of Columbine and Aurora and all those other areas that, that capture the minds of America. These hardened white young men carrying out these horrible crimes against humanity, right? And they do not highlight, nor do they even bring to national attention most of the mass shootings that happen within urban communities. And that doesn't matter, because 9 times out of 10, those committed in urban communities are committed by black folk. I don't like saying people of color, but black folk. And so that doesn't fit the narrative of whatever the narrative they wanted to promote. It doesn't fit it. And each time we see instances like this where the report of gun violence increasing, they have to find something to connect it to. And basically what they're saying is, well, this increase in gun violence, we're seeing this increase in gun violence because we're seeing an increase in gun sales. Correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation. We know last year, 2020, as people were told to shelter in place, people went and bought weapons. Even those who said they never own a weapon, a gun in particular, never own a gun, went and bought guns because they were like, well, if we're going to be inside for this long a time, I'm going to make sure my family and I are safe. There were people who would never have handled a gun, going to gun ranges to learn how to handle a gun. And I ain't gonna lie, I purchased me another one last year too. I found a good deal on one. I went and got it. I don't, it's just a little pea shooter. Yeah, I'm not getting AR-15s or anything like that. I shoot to disable, not to kill. And I'm gonna make sure that that I can stop that person that may be trying to harm me or harm someone else I may be in the vicinity of. I'm one of those good guys with a gun. At the same time, while I advocate for responsible gun ownership and gun violence prevention. Yeah, I know some people say, how can you do it? It's easy. I'm going to protect my house and myself, and I'm going to tell people, don't react negatively, pull out a weapon and kill someone. You don't have to do that. You have a dispute, and it's just the message I'm trying to get to young black men. One of the options that I'm trying to present to our community here is to look, we need to help teach these young black men in particular who are full of angst, rage, aggression, all of this. We need to teach them how to divert that, how to invest that negative energy into something that can be positive. boxing, martial arts, marching band, and that sure take out the aggression. Anything, and other areas, invest in the arts, invest in the community in some way. And so I'm working with a lot of other persons. We're trying to get that back into the city and get this back into the community and bring community, a sense of community, identity, connection to these young black men who somehow have access to weapons, who shouldn't have access to weapons. I'm talking about teenagers, 14, 15, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds who aren't in the military. They're not in the National Guard. They should not have access to weapons. Just learned recently, an acquaintance of mine, relative, who her 5-year-old son got access to her gun and accidentally killed his own mother playing with the gun. This is kind of gun violence that, that does not make the news nationally. It may make local news, and it will certainly pull on the heartstrings of people, but it is not enough to draw people to action. And that's what we're trying to get. That's what we need. We need people to act. We need people to be able to say that I'm tired of this and I want this gun violence to end. And when we do that, we can really have what we need. So let me get back to the story of San Jose. It's tragic. And I know a lot of people are going to be moved by this because they're tired of gun violence happening at this scale. Nobody should lose their life because of one disgruntled person. Nobody should do that. And we should get tired of hearing it. And if you are tired, I want to invite you to get involved. Don't just watch the news, be mad, and say it's somebody else's job to do it. But I want you to get involved. You need to get involved, and you can get involved by joining Everytown. You simply, and as me being a survivor advocate for the Everytown Survivor Network, one of my roles is to get people to get involved. And I believe your voice is just as important as my voice when it comes to getting involved, and not just talking about it, not just watching it on the news, but getting involved. I want you to, wherever you are right now, if you're watching, I want you to text right now, join, text the word join, JOIN, to 64433. Text the word join, JOIN, 64433. You see it on the screen if you're watching live. You just heard it on the radio if you're watching. Even if you're streaming and you're in another country. I have a lot of listeners in South Africa. If you're listening in South Africa, you may not have gun violence. Yeah, they got a lot of it down there too. If you're Zulu and you're listening, you're still mourning the loss of your queen, your king, and the craziness of your new king, the regent, and all of that. Hey, you can still get involved. We need your voice over here in America too. Wherever you're listening from, I appreciate all my listeners across the world. I appreciate you so much. Anyway, but that's what you can do right now. Text join, JOIN, 64433. That's what you need to do. And I'm telling you, it is going to help so much. But condolences goes out to the families of those victims, to the first responders, to the entire community of San Jose and Silicon Valley, the Bay Area, all of that. Yeah. But we must always remember that happened in the upscale of the upscale, the wealthiest of the wealthy. It happened in that place. Just go across the bay and it's happening in Oakland. Go a little further down, it's happening in Stockton. It's happening in Compton. It's happening in the smaller little towns across the country. It's happening big time in DC, Chicago, Atlanta, Birmingham, Miami, Charlotte, Little Rock, Oklahoma City, Louisville. We can go on and on. Ohio, Cincinnati, Columbus, Akron, however they say it. It's happening here. We can do something about it. Anyway, that's my rant for that. But please act, if you don't mind. Take a quick break. When we come back from the break, we are going to talk about George Floyd and Black America 1 year later. So let's take this break. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Zera. Today, I am your humble host, Dr. Lorenzo Neal, thank you so much for thinking out robbery to tune in wherever you are listening. If you're listening by way of the Facebook page, Zera Network on Facebook, we thank you so much. If you're listening by way of live radio across all the platforms we are on, we thank you so much. Wherever you are listening, and if you're watching live on Facebook, and if you're watching on YouTube later on, wherever you're watching, we thank you so much. We thank you for what you're doing. I want to take this time. If you have not done so, go to lorenzotneal.com, look at the site, read the articles there, and buy a book. Buy a book. Invite me to come do something for you. I don't know what I could do, but you can invite me to do something. Read my bio, you'll see what I can do, and the various opportunities that I have available. And make sure you go to patreon.com/Lorenzo T. Neal and become a patron for the Zera Today show for a little as $1 a month. Your support helps do what I'm doing. Look, I'm upgrading. I'm doing better than I was a year ago. Ain't that something? And next month will be the 11th year that I've been doing the Zera Today radio show, and I'm excited. I'm excited. I've been doing it this long. But anyway, thank you guys so much. So let's get into the topic of the day. The 1 year anniversary of the death, the murder of George Floyd. It's been observed, and before I get into this, it's also the 100-year anniversary of the Greenwood Community Massacre. We call it the Tulsa Riots of 1921, but it's the Greenwood Community Massacre, where the white community members of Tulsa went into the predominantly black community of Greenwood that was prosperous, that was called the Black Wall Street, and they literally burned it down. And there are only, I think there's just one surviving person from that time who's alive today. She's over 100 years old, and she's been recognized this week. We want to recognize the legacy of that community, and not just that community, but there are many other communities. There's the oh my goodness, it escapes me right now. Mound Bayou community in Mississippi that was the similar way. Rosewood, and many other, Elaine, Arkansas. We could go on and name these communities. Harlem, when it was Harlem. These communities of black people that thrived. They thrived, and they were segregated, and they thrived. They didn't depend on the government. They didn't depend on white folk. They did what they needed to do for themselves, and they thrived, and they became a target. And I think we need that mentality today, if you know what I'm talking about. So we have the 100-year anniversary of that event, and we have the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd. And the question I'm asking: have black people fared better 1 year later? And the question I'm posing is not just recognized as far as the what some people would use the word oppression, and I don't really think we're oppressed, but the injustice, I think, is a better word. The injustice, not just in policing, but economically, educationally, politically, and of course, when it comes to criminal justice. And it's no secret that I lean more toward the conservative end of things. I'm center right when it comes to a lot of issues politically and socially. The one thing I can say is that the incident with George Floyd last year disrupted the entire framework of American identity altogether. It disrupted the entire framework of municipal policing across the country. And it disrupted the entire framework of the value of black men's lives. And that's loaded. That's loaded. So, how have we fared now following George Floyd's death? Those nearly 9 minutes that Derek Chauvin had his knee on that man, and you watch the video and you see those bystanders saying, "Look, man, he's had enough. He's not moving. He's not breathing. Yo, get him some help." And to see the officers just standing there, seemingly helpless, and watching Chauvin just kind of have this look like, "Yeah, I'm in control. I got this." The imagery is it is a part of our social consciousness now. Can't escape it. And to be followed, I mean, this is following the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery, several other police involved shootings that were highlighted by national media, and of course Breonna Taylor, an incident that happened with her, followed by some other incidents with a young man in Atlanta. I can't remember his name, who was fleeing from officers when he was shot. Well, he wasn't fleeing. He basically brought harm upon himself. It introduced several questions that black men have been wrestling with for years, decades, including myself, when we try to train our young black sons on how to interact with law enforcement, because we've learned in some cases, even when you're told to comply and you do comply, you can still lose your life. And that life, the officer who takes that life can still be seen as justified. It raised the question about qualified immunity for officers. It raised the question about policing in a new way, particularly funding, with the call for defunding the police, and the expression of the rage that followed across the country, rioting, and in some places, rioting that is still continuing, that has nothing to do with George Floyd. So let's walk this back. George Floyd is killed. Immediately, the entire country recognizes that this was a grave injustice. Even the late radio host Rush Limbaugh questioned it, and he had the conversation with the Breakfast Club as to why did this happen. I wish I had the clip to play, but you can go to YouTube and Google Rush Limbaugh and the Breakfast Club. I'm quite sure you'll find the interview. I listened to the interview when he played it on his program last year, and I could hear. I don't know if Rush's sickness was bringing about this lamentation. If he was aware of how close he was to death because of his illness, how if that had any impact on his reaction and the seemingly empathy that he had as a result in response to this incident. I don't know, but it was just good to hear Rush Limbaugh for the one time, on the side of the victim. And even now, even a year later, after the death, we still have some conservative pundits. I just don't understand how they're trying to frame Floyd from his criminal history instead of framing him as the victim of police brutality. That's what it was. We know he had a record, and he was deemed ready, paroled, and on good and regular standing to be able to do what he was doing. And yes, we have to admit that he was high. The brother had enough in him. It does drugs in his system, and he also had COVID. We later discovered, but those contributing factors did play a role in what got him in his predicament. Yes, we have to acknowledge that. That's the reality. You don't neglect that. Some people are trying to celebrate him as a hero, as a patron saint of criminal justice and law enforcement violence and all of that. They're trying to paint him as that. And I understand the argument, and I also understand the counter argument. But when you look at it holistically in its totality, we know that yes, he had a role to play in his death. But should we highlight the role that he played in his death? No. It's not like he was, he got high saying, no, I'm gonna die today. No, and any person who puts it in that perspective, your mind is warped. Any person who deals with individuals who have drug-related issues will know that sometimes that they make decisions that are not the best and not in their best interest, and because of that, it could lead to their demise. We can fault them for the disease of addiction. We can fault them for the decisions that we made, but we can't fault them for their death. And neither, especially when it comes at the hands of another person, that could have been prevented. Now, if Floyd had died from the intoxication of the drugs that he had, then it would have been a different thing. I did not watch the trial. I didn't hear all. I heard several arguments post. After the trial about the system, the drugs in the system contributing to his death. COVID may have contributed to his death. Asphyxiation by knee contributed to his death. The whole point is this officer, Derek Chauvin, and those officers who were with him on the scene, allowing him to do so, are the reason he is dead. Okay? That's it. And for those conservative pundits who are still trying to appropriate George Floyd as a criminal, and I'm not trying to put him as a victim alone, but to see him in this one capacity and I have empathy about how he died, that's you need to get back in touch with humanity, man. That's what you need to do. And for the liberals, for those more progressive persons who are trying to hail him as some kind of hero, you got to remember, the man did have a criminal record. He did porn. I ain't gonna lie, man. I saw that clip. I saw the clip. Don't y'all lie and say y'all didn't see the clip too. I'm sure some of y'all probably saw that clip too. I think it was the Habib show, something like. If I gave him free publicity, my bad, y'all. But he was not the best human being. Neither am I the best human being. Neither are you the best human being. But prior to that, his death, he was doing things that was positively impacting his community. And that's what he needs to be recognized for. And that's what he needs to be remembered for. The fact that he was literally trying to do, while he was in Houston, he was trying to do things while he was in prison, after he got out of prison, and even leading up to his death, he was still trying to do things that would be positive for his community. And yes, we should observe that. We should recognize that. But should we hail him for that? No. We don't want to do that. He's not a martyr for social justice, okay? Matter of fact, we should not have martyrs for social justice. It's sad that we do. It's sad that we have Martin Luther King Jr. It's sad that we have Malcolm X. It's sad that we have Robert Kennedy. It's sad for those persons of the LGBT plus community. They had Harvey Milk. It's sad that we have martyrs for this. We shouldn't have it. And I could go down the pantheon of names for other areas of social engagement where people, suffered death that led to a greater cause being promoted. And that's just, it's sad how that exists, but it shouldn't be. And I'm hoping that we can get away from that. But anyway, back to George Floyd, what else did it do for him? I mean, not for him, but for this country. What? Let me pull up some. I had some notes that I really wanted, because I really wanted to be clear. I didn't want to ramble on this. I wanted to make sure I had clear points and clear arguments that I could articulate and hopefully get some engagement from. Um, if you want to call, you can 347-237-5230. If you're listening live by way of whatever streaming listening platform you are, if you would like to, we gladly would do that. Anyway, so let's go back and address the rioting that happened, not just there, but the rioting. This is the conditioning that I was disappointed by, because after George Floyd, from that moment, every officer involved shooting, no matter where it happened in this country, even if the person did not die, as in the case of someone in Wisconsin, that person did not die, but they were rioting. And even up until, even recently, just a few weeks back, we saw the young lady who was, well, they weren't rioting, they were protesting. Let me be more specific. In some places, there was rioting. And by rioting, I'm defining that as the destruction of property. By protesting, I mean that people got out in the streets, they yelled, they had their signs, and they did what they did. That's protesting. That's wonderful. But the destruction of property, be it either private or public, is unnecessary, uncalled for. And we saw this continually happening across the country. We saw the establishment of in Seattle of an autonomous zone where it in itself had gun violence. We see in Portland. We see in Portland in this, even now, they're still rioting. And I don't understand why people in Portland are rioting. Not only do they have the advantage of privilege, they ain't got nothing to, I just don't get it. You got a bunch of white rich people, let me say not about rich people, but more affluent people, okay, who are just, and most of these are Gen Z and millennials, who are pushing younger millennials, who are pushing this, and they're riding just because they can. And it don't matter if they're Antifa or anything else. They are rioting simply because they can. That's it. There is nothing opposing them. There is no intentional crime being committed against them, no oppression coming at them, and yet they're they're doing all this. It makes no sense to me. It may make sense to them. Maybe I'm mistaken. They're I don't know. And then we see not just the continuous rioting and protesting, but this is the biggest thing that has really. No, let me. I'm gonna come to this later. The the critical race theory arguments that have gone back and forth, so much so that the Southern Baptist Convention is presenting a resolution in its convention coming up next month to address critical race theory and say that it is not relevant, is not Christian, is not something that they should address, and black folk just need to get over. And that's how it's not what the language of the resolution says, but that's what it pretty much said. Black folk, y'all just need to fall in line. White folk, y'all just need to stop being so excitable. Let's get back to the old days. Like, go back to old days. We ain't talk about race. Them niggers, them colored folk, they stayed in their place. We stayed in ours. Hobnabbit. If y'all didn't get that, that was me spitting. Like shoot. Never mind. It didn't make any sense. But so critical race theory and the idea of white guilt. This book, White Fragility, and I've read through it, and it made me laugh. And I talked about this on another show a few not long ago. It's this idea of black people are unable to do for themselves, and because black people are so oppressed, so disenfranchised, and white people are so privileged, even if they don't have privilege or they don't recognize it, they're so privileged just because they're white, that we need to tear the entire system down. We need to deconstruct the whole identity. We need to basically go back to segregation. Let black people be in their own space. Let white people be in their own space, because the interaction of the two will cause so much chaos. We just need to, and white people are to blame for all of it. And you couple that with the 1619 Project, that it says that yes, America was founded in 1776, but America was really founded when the first black folk came here. And they didn't come, all of them didn't come as indentured servants. Hint, hint, Ben Carson. Nah, I'm just kidding. But this idea of critical race theory, and as a preacher who's been preaching black liberation as long as I have been preaching, since 12 years old, 16 years old, in my 20s, and even now in my 40s, black liberation, the theology associated with that, has always been a part of my preaching. And I know there are some black conservatives who are like, man, you shouldn't be preaching that. And I was reflecting earlier on Dr. Jeremiah Wright, and how they just tore him apart in 2007, because of one soundbite. They didn't listen to the rest of his sermons, but that one soundbite where he said, God damn America. And if you're on YouTube, this probably be demonetized, but that's all right. And they tore him asunder because of that. And I think about the writings that I grew up reading, not just James and Cecil Cone, but so many others, Dr. Henry Mitchell, the soul of black preaching, and who else? I can name a whole lot of them whose influence on black preaching related and brought the holistic experience of black America, including how they were, we were disenfranchised from the church, in the church, in America. And so, yeah, there's a reality to that. And I do understand there are some Marxist undertones and overtones to that. Hey, man, back in the 60s, that was a reality. We were trying to redefine us as community. We were going through that process of integration and trying to find us as a community. And, getting back to that, yeah, that there are some, overtones of that. But that's a part of black preaching, because black people have always been community. We've always been, we're not communists when it comes to philosophy. And like Black Lives Matter used the idea of being trained Marxists to promote this idea of intersectionality. And we know as black folk, intersectionality does not work for us. We cannot call for black action, collective action, and being actualized as a black people and include everybody else. We can't do that. We have to be ourselves. We have to be the community, black folk. We can't be black transgender. We can't be black LGBTQ. And I know there are people who identify that, but when it comes to the table, and I said this on another show. So when the 1963 March on Washington, the groups who were there and the people who spoke, they, in all essence, as we understand today, were intersectional. But they knew they had one cause. right? That was the cause for jobs. That was the marks for jobs, right? If I understand it correctly. And the economic integration and independence or interdependence, however you want to phrase it. And that's what it was for. That's what it was all about. That hasn't changed. And just because people identify in certain ways, we can't differentiate and delineate from the main cause as black folk, because that means it's taking away from us as a community. And I know we don't like hearing that. I know we got to be accepting, but think about it. Black folk are the only ones, the only community that's been fully accepting of everybody else. And those other communities have not been fully accepting of us. Think about that for a second. We've been fully accepting of everyone else. We love everybody. We welcome everybody. And those same communities do not reciprocate that same thing. So we can't be intersectional. But that's a whole different rant. But anyway, the idea of critical race theory and how it's being, schools are starting to adopt it, and some white people are just mad because, it is what it is. And most of them don't even really understand it. They're just getting the talking points from conservative outlets that they are getting their talking points from, and they're regurgitating that without truly exploring what it was, the history of it, And when you go back and look at the history of the critical race theory from the 80s or 70s, 80s, then you understand within that context and how it can be applicable to us today. I'm not an advocate of it. I'm not going to promote it, but I understand the contextualization of it. But I also know that black folk, we have our own efficacy. We don't need the efficacy of government or anything else. We have their own needs. They tell us to put ourselves up our own bootstrap, right? That's what they say we ought to do. Well, let us do it. Get out of our way. Let us do it. Get out of our way. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. If you'd like to, just leave a comment wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching, however, leave a comment. I appreciate it. This last thing, because I'm running out of time. Defunding the police. The call to defund the police. And this has probably been the most deflated of all the calls to action post George Floyd's death. Instead of municipalities defunding the police, there have been some who have done that on paper, and then violence increased, crime increased, and they were like, well, we can't immediately defund the police, but we can shift some funds from the police to other organizations, not organizations, but other means of management. So we have, and look, being somewhat of a libertarian, I'm thinking government should be infringing on anybody's, rights, not just rights, but life. I think people can do, and communities. Why am I not stumbling over it? Why am I doing all that? Communities can self-police. Communities can self-govern with little and minimal government involvement. I understand the role of government to be what it is, and there's a need for it to function in a way. But you remember now, policing in municipalities is a government agency. And if we say we need police, then we're saying we need welfare. I know that's a bad argument. But in so many ways, that's how, like, matter of fact, I said that because I heard there's this YouTuber named The Amazing Lucas. And I listened to him, and he made this comparison, and I thought about it for a second. And I'm like, yeah, that does make some sense, but I probably, it's not the best analogy, but there's some correlation. Not much, but there's some correlation there. But for municipalities are beginning to realize that they can reform policing. They can reform policing without defunding the police. The question particularly in urban centers where violent crime seems to be increasing. As I know gun violence is definitely increasing, but other violent crimes are increasing. The question is, how do we adequately shift uh, funding to government programs or community programs that can serve as interventionist programs? Now, I'm speaking particularly for Black communities and programs directed toward Black men. And I talked about this earlier in the program, because a lot of the crimes that are being committed in urban centers are committed by Black men, and in other areas where there's a broader concentration of brown people, we're seeing that also. Um, and that's not just gun violence, but that's also suicides and all of that, domestic violence, armed robberies, burglaries, all of those things. Um, that's rising, partially because we were in sheltering in place. There was no way for us to go, and nothing for a lot of young Black men to do. And so when they had access to a gun, they got in an argument. Guess what they did? They shot. When they didn't have access to a gun and they didn't have anything else to do, guess what they did? They they did whatever they did. They committed crimes. And so we've got to address this delicate situation of criminal justice reform across the board. You know, what should it look like? What should proper policing look like? And Joe Biden, President Biden, has been in office now, and one of the things he campaigned on was police reform, and that's stalled. That has stalled. The House is not acting on it. The Senate is definitely not acting on it, and local municipalities are caught in this 90 seconds. What do I do? What do we do? If we said we would defund the police. I think New York cut their policing budget quite a bit, in a billion. I think if I'm mistaken about that, y'all can correct me. But they're learning that we need this, and they're talking about demilitarizing the police. Well, the reason for the militarization of the police was because in the 90s, y'all politicians said we're gonna be tough on crime. That was from conservative and liberal. They all said the same thing. We're going to be tough on crime. And tough on crime means we're going to make sure the police have the proper means of, aggressively enforcing the law. And we know what happened as a result of that aggressive enforcement of the law. More Black folk, Black men got locked up. Families disrupted. Tough sentencing laws for minute crimes. Yeah, that's what happened. And here we are now, decades later, trying to reconcile that call to action with this new call to action of police reform, criminal justice reform. Conservatives are saying, let the police do what the police do. If they got to beat somebody up to do it, then let them beat somebody up to do it, because they deserve to get beat up in the first place if they committed a crime. Even if that crime was petty shoplifting, they shouldn't have petty shoplifted. That argument from some white people, conservative white people, and well, just let me not say white people. I'm just talking some people in general, Black and white, who lean more toward the conservative side of things. So we have got to think critically about how this is. We don't want to see another police officer kneeling on a Black man's neck, kneeling on a white man's neck, kneeling on a brown man's neck, kneeling on a white lady's neck, kneeling on a Black lady's neck. Nobody's neck should be kneeled on until they die. We don't want to see police officers mistaking a taser for a gun. We don't want to see police officers reacting 10 seconds after getting out of their vehicles, letting off some rounds and killing somebody. We don't want to see that. But at the same time, we understand that police officers have to react in a blink of an eye. We understand that as more persons are having serious mental health issues and coming in contact with law enforcement, and those law enforcement officers are not properly trained to interact with these people, and it leads to death. We understand. We don't want to see that. I don't even want to see somebody being shot while running away from police. I have a brother who's a police officer. He's been in incidents like that, and he didn't like that, having to be in incidents like that. So I know many others like him don't like that. We don't want to see that. But there's a lot that we can do that can take away from that. We can do it. We should do it. We can't do it. I don't have the answer. I'm not going to sit up here and try to tell you that I have the answer. I don't have the answer. But I do know that we can do it. Collectively, we can put our heads together and we can come up with something that will help our brothers and sisters, particularly our black brothers. We can come up with something that would help officers understand that we need them. We don't want them to go away. But at the same time, we don't want them to feel that if they do their job, there's a chance that because they did their job and someone's life is lost, even if it's justified, that they will lose their job, their livelihood. We don't want that either. We have to find a delicate balance, and I know our politicians don't like dealing with the delicate balances of life. They just want to be a clear cut, but we know that's not how life is. Life is never black and white. It's more gray than anything else. You look at your own life, as much as you don't want to compromise on things, you find yourself compromising on things, like Paul said in the scripture. There's some things I find myself doing that I don't want to do. Some things I find myself not doing that I would do. Woe to me. Well, I feel like preaching. No. But there's so much. I don't have time. I'm not going to spend 2 hours talking about this. I want you, those of you who are listening, those of you who are watching, wherever you're watching and listening, and feel free to leave comments. I appreciate the comments, all of that. And know that this is my opinion. I'm not a specialist. My background is education. My background is preaching. My background is, yes, it's in rhetoric. But I'm not a politician. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm just, this is just from my observance. So we've got a lot to do. It's a challenge. I hope as a country, as we recognize his death, and not just this death, but if we go through the annals of history of American terrorism. Y'all caught what I said? American terrorism on black folk and people of color. In a short time that America has existed as a country, we could see that there's a need. It's a deep need for healing, reconciliation, reparations. I said that too, and so much more. But anyway, this is Dr. Neil. Let me know what you think. Again, I appreciate you so much. If you're watching on Facebook, on the Zera Network, leave a comment. I love to read that comment and respond to it. If you're watching on wherever you're watching, if you're watching on YouTube now, make sure you leave a comment. And if you would like to, I'll invite you to join the Zera Network and go to Facebook and join the Zera Network. If you have questions that you want to get to me, however you want to, simply email Pastor Lorenzo Neal at gmail.com, or specifically, more specifically, if you like to get information about the show, Zera Media Enterprises at gmail.com. Zera Media Enterprises at gmail.com. Invite you to, I'm saying a whole lot. And if you have not done so, support the show. Go to patreon.com/Lorenzo T. Neal and become a patron of the show. Help me do better, because I'm trying to do better. You know what I mean? God bless you all. God keep you all. Thank you so much for watching and listening. I appreciate you for everything that you are doing. We appreciate you so much. And you are helping us change the world one day at a time. And I'm out. You guys be blessed.